for this one, we decided, I think we kind of told you guys a lot about the recruiting process, ourselves from our perspective, but I think it's important to also hear from some of your peers who have gone through it, and they can now, I guess we can get thoughts from them and some of what was their experience like, and hopefully get some helpful information that can help you guys, whether you're in the middle of the process, the end, or just starting. Hear from players that are just a few years older than you that have already done it. So Ari Green's going to join us. She's currently a first-year soccer player at the University of St. Thomas, studying data analytics, and wants to one day work kind of in a professional sports team as analyzing data. Did I get that right, Ari? Awesome. We also have Liv Milberg. She'll be a soccer player at the University of South Dakota this fall. She intends to major in criminal justice, wants to work in the legal system, studying criminal behavior or something along those lines. And then I have Hadley Johnson joining us. So she's a junior on the 04 team, currently going through the process with a lot of interest from a lot of different levels. So Division 1, 2, and 3, and then currently sorting out, what does she want to do? Where does she want to end up? So what I have a couple of questions, or about 6 of them, maybe some follow-up. I think for people listening in, I would encourage, if you have a question, type it in the chat, and I'll make sure to ask, and if it's specific to a player, just, put it in your notes, ask Ari about XYZ and we can get you an answer. Okay. So I can start us off. But again, as we go, put those questions in there. And then as soon as we find some time, I will make sure to stop, check the chat, and then we'll ask it. And Joe, if there's something that, I miss, just chime right in and feel free to ask. So the first thing, I guess I want to know is, let's see, how involved, so if this is for Ari and Liv, when you go back to like the beginning of your recruiting process, like how involved were you? Like when did it really start for you? Is it 8th grade, 9th grade, 11th? And really, like, how involved were you in the beginning? Well, Ari, you can start us off, and then Liv, jump right in.
For me, I started kind of in 9th grade. I was just like opening my options up, and it got like more intense, I guess, in 10th and 11th grade. And I don't know, I was just kind of open to a lot of options then in 9th grade, and that's why.
Started in 9th grade. Now, the decision kind of started with you saying, hey, I think I want to keep doing this well into college. So what do I need to do now?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then Liv, where did it start for you, and how involved were you in the beginning?
I started like looking at schools and doing ID camp, like big ID camps in like 8th grade, I think, at the end of my 8th grade year. And at the beginning, I was just sending like template emails that my coach like gave us to help start and see if there was any like interest. Okay. But at that point, it was pretty early, so there wasn't a lot at that point, and it started ramping up a lot sophomore and junior year. Yeah.
Okay. How many emails do you think you sent to college coaches from the very beginning?
In the very beginning?
Just approximate. Well, I don't know. I would say the whole process. Like, how many of those initial emails do you think you had to put together?
So many. I had the same template, like, but I changed it so it was specific to each school. But I've sent a lot of emails.
Would you say 20 or more?
Oh, a lot more than that, yeah.
Ari, how many would you say you had to send out to get this process going for you?
Yeah, probably 20 or more, I guess. It was just a lot of, because I didn't really know what I wanted, I guess, so I was just sending out a lot.
Okay. And now Hadley, so if you want, you're in, well, I don't know, you're kind of probably towards the end, kind of figure out what you really like, but like, I guess I'm curious to know, how many have you sent so far? Are we talking in the dozens, 20, 30 more? I just want to give a little bit of a scope of work to like the younger players who are thinking, I want to get this started. I'd like to play in a couple of years. what does that process look like?
Yeah, so when I was probably in like probably more like ninth grade, I started sending like the template emails again, and that was probably like maybe like 30, like just a lot all over like all levels. So I wasn't exactly sure I wanted to do. And then just over time, the last few years, that's just like narrowed down further and further. And then the emails get more specific, obviously, and a lot less of them, obviously, too. But yeah.
Was there ever a time in the very beginning, like sending all those emails, did you ever feel overwhelmed, nervous?
Yeah, for sure,
Okay.
yeah. Just a lot, especially at the beginning, and you're sending out like 40 emails and you're getting like 3 responses back. It just feels like a lot of work for like not much feedback.
Okay. I can tell you as a college coach, the same feeling. I sent out like 40, I get like 1 reply. Like, but you got to put your name out there, and you got to at least take ownership and get that process started. How long into the process until you finally felt like, okay, like there's some traction. I feel like at least I understand some of the process, I'm going to find the right place, right? Because I'm sure in the beginning, sending all these emails and getting 2-3 replies, it's overwhelming. It's a lot of work. So at what point does it start to feel like?
It was probably right around the beginning of COVID, like right at those first few months we were just off. I took a lot of time and kind of narrowed my list down and sent like worked a lot more on making specific emails rather than just kind of like that template version I was talking about. So yeah, probably, what was that? Maybe like May. I started feeling more comfortable with it, and just was a lot easier because I wasn't reaching out to 40 schools anymore. It was just more narrowed down.
Okay. Ari, Liv, same thing about junior. So you guys talked about like narrowing down what you want, like lists. So I'm going to jump to a different one here because I feel like this helps. Let me see. When you started to research, like I'm curious to hear from you guys, what were some of the things that were really important to you when you looked at schools? Because in the beginning, it's just a lot, right? Then over time, you start to do research, you start to really give it more thought maybe as a sophomore or early junior year. Like, what are some things that are important to you? And Hadley, we'll start with you because you're on my screen first, and then we'll go Liv and Ari. Things that are important to you when you looked at schools. And then a follow-up question as you wrap it up, did your list change over time?
Yeah, so for me, one main thing I looked for like the whole time through was like really good academic school. And that kind of like, so at first I reached out to a lot of schools. That's kind of something I always kept in the back of my head. Like that's what I really wanted to go to. And that was kind of narrowed down. Like a lot of it was based off of like the relationships I made with coaches, like if there's a school I wasn't super interested in, but I had a really good relationship with the coach, I'd kind of follow up on that more versus like a dream school that wasn't even getting back to me. So I think a lot of like those relationships kind of helped me narrow it down. And then what was the follow-up question again?
Just like, did your list change? So you mentioned you wanted a really academic school, and that's kind of one of your initial filters there. As you visited schools or did research, like were there other things that became important to you, became less important, or more important?
I mean, yeah, my list definitely changed a little bit, but I think some of those schools I've been talking to like over a year now, those like same core schools are still the same, but there's been like other schools I've been talking to or stopped talking to throughout that probably a year. So it's changed a little bit, but not a ton. Okay.
And you mentioned something about like personal relationships, just like, interactions with the coach. Became important to you through the process.
Yeah, for sure. Like if it was someone who's going to respond to me every time and give me like good feedback versus someone who's like going to watch a video and not say anything. It made me more like enticed to follow up with them.
Okay, fair enough. And when you make those columns, like that relationship with the coach or your potential future coach is really important.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So Liv, go for it, and then Ari. Thank you.
For me, so I started in 8th grade, like really thinking about like college and everything. And I always knew that I wanted to be out of state and I wanted to play D1. So those were my parameters. And my parents weren't super happy about them because they wanted me to be more flexible, and neither were my coaches. But I started I wasn't very flexible when I started looking. I only looked at D1, which I shouldn't have done. That's not the right way to go about it, I don't think. But my list definitely changed once you start meeting coaches and like start seeing the schools and like watching their games. You just get a sense if you would fit or not, and then that kind of narrowed it down for me a little bit. And what I wanted to pursue for like a degree, that had a big impact. My junior year, beginning of junior year, I switched what I thought I wanted to do. I wanted to do medicine originally, and now I don't want to do anything with medicine. So that changed the schools that I was looking at. So that was a big part of it for me. And so I originally wanted to go far West Coast, like 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. And now I'm going to South Dakota, so not super far away. But I think like I only started talking to my coach in the middle of June, I want to say. So I was talking to them during Corona. So that kind of narrowed down the location for me a little bit too, because it was just so much more difficult to talk to coaches on the West Coast. So I think just like situational things changed my list a lot for sure.
Okay. Awesome. I have a follow-up question for you after we hear from Ari. Because you talked about how I want to go far away and then ultimately we're close by. So Ari, why don't you chime in and talk to us about, what was important to you? Because I think earlier on you had very academic, like very strict academic interests, and it kind of narrowed things down for you a little bit. But go for it, elaborate for us.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to stay close, and I also wanted like an academic school. And so I was looking at those kind of schools, and I guess that was like the two most important parts for me, and it didn't really change a whole ton. I kind of narrowed it down even closer, if I like say, I guess, but yeah, that's pretty much like the main parts.
So you were set pretty early on, like location. That's important. I want to be in this area. I mean, that's not a bad place to start, because we have players on the call that they might be in ninth grade. Maybe they don't know what, maybe they want to be like Liv and just totally leave the area or stay. So that's not a bad important thing to put on there. If the academic interest, if it's specific majors, I think a couple years ago you were pretty set on engineering, which
Yeah.
okay, that narrows things down, quite a bit.
Yeah.
In terms of who has the major, but then also, that balance between what level I'm going to go to be able to do engineering, and play. Okay. So, and did it change over time? Like, it sounds like you were talking about engineering in the beginning of your research, and now your major's a little bit different. So it changed over time?
Yeah, I noticed, or like as I was going through it, I'm like, am I really interested in engineering? And I know a lot of people change their major, so I was like, okay, maybe I'll look into different options. And it was like great that I chose a school where I could change if I needed to.
Okay, good. That's actually not bad advice for some players. Like, if you aren't totally sure, do they have your secondary or your third kind of option? That way, if you need to change it your freshman year, you can. Okay, and it sounds like you found a good place where you were able to do that. Okay, awesome. So I want to go back to Liv, because this one's specific to you. So early on, you actually had a lot of interest from like Division II programs, and I think they were interested in you. You weren't as excited about it. I was your coach at the time, so I remember these conversations. And like, how did you deal with that? How did you say kind of like, no thanks, I need more time? Like, you kept all those doors open so that later on, when you ultimately decided, I actually want to come back closer to home now. So, can you talk to us about that? Because I think we might have some players that might be in similar, positions right now.
Yeah. So my biggest thing was not to close any doors until I was certain that I wanted to close them. And if I did close it, it was on good terms, because my the assistant coach where I'm going right now was actually the head coach at Bethel a few years ago. So, and if I would have completely closed that door, then I probably would not have started talking to her when she transferred to South Dakota. So that was pretty important. And just, I have always tried to be very upfront and honest. Like, this is what I'm looking for. I know you're not in California. I'm looking to go out there more, like, or not in state as much, I guess. And when they are trying to like ramp it up and like start offering you and give you deadlines, you just have to like be confident in yourself and know, like, do I want to go to this school? And just, it's okay to say no. Just be polite about it. Do what you think is right for your process. And yeah, I guess just don't, if you have to close the door, just make sure you close it in the right way. And that was pretty important for my process.
Awesome. That's lots of good information on that. I like the connection between, so your Division I assistant coach was recruiting you while she was the assistant coach at a Division III school.
I talked to her, yeah.
Yep. So you were talking to her. So it's important. You never know what could happen year
Yeah.
after year, right? Coaches could be at a different school now. So always be, you know, always reply, be respectful, like, yes, leave everything on good terms and just being honest about what you're looking for. There's nothing wrong with what you at the time you wanted to go somewhere else. And
Yeah.
as the years went on, you decided maybe closer to home isn't so bad. So and it all worked out, which is fantastic. Now
Yeah.
Hadley, you're in the middle of all this right now with lots of options. How are you dealing with that? Like, are you experiencing any of, having to say, hey, hang on a second, I'm still exploring some of these other schools? COVID has really limited things. Like, you can't really visit as much, so you kind of have to say pump the brakes. But what are you going through right now?
Yeah, so that's like exactly what I'm going through. There's a few like bigger schools out east that like they've watched my videos, but like they're not gonna recruit anyone without like seeing me play in person. So it's like I have to wait till after April to get that chance. So that
Sure.
leaves me kind of like on hold with other schools. I'm interested there, not want to close any doors, but like I want to go explore these other options before like making a yes or no decision.
Okay. And is it communication? Is it going well? Like, how are you, what's the feedback when you have to tell them, like, hey, I need to do some more visits, or we need to wait until the spring?
Yeah, it's been pretty positive, I think. I mean, it's still fairly early, I think. So it's not getting to that point where like, hey, we need a decision. So for now, it's been pretty positive. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And you're doing your diligence, like when you're asking for more time, and it's because you need to look at other schools and, make sure you're getting out there and doing that research, not just putting it off and putting it off. So that way, when you get to the point where you still want to keep them on the list or not, right, you're confident in that next decision. So this brings me to like ID camps. Like, I want to hear, have you been to ID camps? Like, what was that like? And then what advice do you have for other players who are probably right now waiting for these ID camps to open up so they can go to them? Like, you guys have kind of gone to a few, right? So what is it like? And then a little bit of advice for somebody who maybe has one on the horizon here, and they want to hear from somebody within the club. Like, what's some advice for me? So let's start with, we go Hadley, Ari, Liv. Does that work? All right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
so I've been to like, I think 4 ID camps, maybe 5. And this was all before COVID, obviously. Well, actually, no, I went to 2 this summer when we were allowed to travel again. Anyways, I think my advice would just be like, with the bigger ID camps where it's like multiple schools going, I think you kind of have to do a lot of reaching out beforehand and like make contact to get noticed, because if you just show up, you might get noticed. But like if you reach out to those schools beforehand and like get their attention, you're gonna have a better chance of getting attention from them. And then with the more specific ones, I think you're going to want to go to those after getting like a pretty solid relationship with the coach there. If you're going to an ID camp that just has like one school attending, it's like their camp, I think you're going to be a lot better off if you've like established a relationship beforehand with that coach.
Okay. I'm going to sum that up in 2 bullet points because those were dead on. If you're going to a big one with a lot of coaches, do the messaging before you go. That way, now they can watch you play and identify you. And if it is a specific one, I would say make sure you're at least in the recruiting process with them and there's some communication back and forth before you kind of just randomly show up. It's the best use of your time, and it leads to less awkwardness. So you're doing it right, and you've already done 4, correct? Awesome. Any more coming up?
Yeah, I have one in the summer, but I haven't signed up for it yet. I don't think. There's a few that are just kind of, everything's on hold right now. It's like late August, and it's like, you have to put a lot of money down on it. So it's kind of like decisions about which ones you want to pick and choose from. So
yeah, fair enough. And so then one bit of advice, what would you give to somebody looking to go to their first one?
I would just say like be confident in yourself and like don't be afraid to like talk to coaches and kind of stand out, like get their attention. And
Okay.
Yeah, just be confident.
Awesome. Be confident. Thank you so much. Okay. Ari, go for it, and then Liv.
Okay, so I went to a good amount of ID camps, both like individual players or like individual schools and a whole bunch of schools. And it was nice at like the individual ones, you could feel for the competition and see how like the team plays or like what their style is. And also some of the recruits would be there from like older classes, so you could see what they're like and kind of get a feel for what the culture might be like when you get there.
Okay.
And for the more group ones, it also is important to email those coaches just so they can see you play. And both the individual schools and the group schools are important, I think. And some advice I would give is play to your strengths. Like, don't try to be someone who you aren't. Like, I don't know, like if you have a really good shot, show it and stuff like that.
Sure. No, that's fantastic advice. You be you. Don't try to be anybody else. You'll have to deal with that struggle for several years if that's where you end up going, right? Like, just do what you do well. Let them know that if you can crush a ball, then do it. Make sure that they see that before you go that day. Awesome. Thank you, Ari. And then Liv,
Okay.
I want to know, how many ID camps do you think you went to? And talk to us about.
I've probably gone to over 10. I've gone to a lot. When I was first starting, I went to a lot of more local schools. I know I did U of M. I went to Drake a bunch, Iowa State, that kind of thing. But I also went out to Oregon State, and like I did a big ID camp in California. So it just, I guess it depends where you are in the process. I started doing a lot of bigger ID camps at the beginning because you get a feel for it. You're able to just like figure out what kind of coaches you like and get used to like playing with new people and just like talking to coaches. I always sent one of my basic emails or first emails out before any of those. Just to like introduce myself to the coaches. And then I always followed up after the ID camp and asked for any feedback or just talked to the coach or said thank you. Yeah.
No,
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
I think you did great. And actually, I think some of what you guys have answered helps me answer one of the questions we got from somebody. Like, how many ID camps do we recommend going to? I think, Liv, you alluded to going to some of the bigger ones early on to figure out what coaching styles you might like. So you probably went to, they were bigger, they were more, some of them were multiple schools are there. Sure, in the beginning, I would do stuff like that too. So you're kind of gauging, how do you stack up against all these players, and what kind of coaching do you feel like might work for you? If there's interest from some of those schools, that might lead to later on, maybe you're doing less as you get older, less ID camps, but they're more specific. Because like Ari's comment was, you get to see the culture now. You get to see, some of the current players, some of the incoming players, and now it's just that school. So earlier on, maybe it's bigger, trying to get names on your list, and then later on, it's probably going to be fewer. And now you're diving a little bit deeper. So like if it's between these three schools, go to their camps and see what they're like. And that might help you cross one off a list or really highlights a school and says, that's where I want to be. So I hope I answered that question for you. I have another one here. So let's see. Campus visits. We have players right now who some are waiting because of COVID, can't do their visits, but some are waiting to do their first visit. So tell me about, what are those visits like? And then I guess one piece of advice you have for somebody going on their visit, right? So I'm curious, how many visits do you think that you did as well? Go ahead, Liv, Ari, Hadley.
In terms of like official or like meeting with a coach and doing visits, I think I've done 2 of those. And then me and my dad would just go like on tournaments and stuff like that, or at ID camps, and we just go walk around and just see like the campus and everything. Cause sometimes the tours can get kind of long, and it's fun to just like get your feel for campus. And in terms of Corona and visits and everything, so I just committed in August, and we weren't able to do an official visit because of Corona. So me and my dad just drove down to the school and walked around it for 4 hours or something. And then I told my coach that I was wanting to accept his offer on my way home. So sometimes it doesn't have to be an official visit to know like you really like the school. I'd recommend doing that if you are able to. But if you know you really like the school and everything, I think sometimes it's worth the risk of not doing the official visit every time. But if you can, try and do it. You're muted.
Thanks. So you had the experience of doing the official visits. Ultimately, where you ended up, kind of COVID didn't allow you to do one, but you improvised. So
Yeah.
take your dad down there, walk campus for 4 hours. If you get the right feeling while you're there,
Yeah.
it's a good place. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Liv. Ari and then Hadley.
So I did a lot of visits, whether it was like just walking around, kind of like Liv was talking about, but also I did tours just to get a feel of the campus. And I only did a few visits actually with coaches, but the visits, whether it's like with a coach or not, they give you like an opportunity to see what the school is like more in depth, not only like the soccer program, but also the school as a whole. And on one of my last or later visits, I did an overnight, which it helped me like come to a decision, I guess, just because I could like see what the players were like and how they practice. I don't know. It was just like more connecting, I guess.
Okay, that's awesome. So you did everything from an unofficial, no one knows I'm here, I'm just going to walk through campus with my family, to visits with admissions but didn't involve a coach, visits where you involved a coach, and then ultimately like an overnight visit. Like, and I'm assuming obviously the more interest you got, like the further along you got in the process and the more you worked with a coach, okay, now I'm going to go visit with a coach. Okay, and then the final one is an overnight, and that really is, how's the team, how's the competition, how's the culture, are they nice people, so again, you're probably not going to do overnights at a lot of schools. It might just be 1, 2, or 3, but you got to do a lot of your homework before that to be comfortable for that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, that's good advice. Now, so Hadley, visits, because so I guess you're in the situation where it's unique because of COVID, but a lot of people on teams right now can totally relate to what you're going through. So your advice, it's got to be pretty crucial. Like, what has it been like going on visits lately? Have you been able to?
Yeah, so I've done like they mentioned, a lot of like unofficial, just like walking around campuses when I've been able to. I've only done one like official visit where I met the coach, and I think that was like a really nice opportunity. But like at the same time with COVID and everything, I don't know if it's like necessary, like especially if it's not like something that's easy to do for you. Like I think if you know that you like a school and you know the coach well enough, like you should be confident in kind of making that decision. But it is nice to do the visit when you're able to. But again, I've only done one, so I don't have too much experience with it. But
Okay, now your list, do you anticipate that as restrictions are lifted like this summer, is that something for you? I got to get out there and at least see a little more of these places like on my own. Do you want to do more visits with coaches?
Like ideally I would, yeah, but at the same time it's like you have to kind of budget like how many trips you're able to make and how many ID camps you can attend. So I kind of said to see how it plays out, I guess. But ideally I would want to see campuses, yeah.
Okay. Well, Liv and Ari, I'm going to give you their numbers. So if you need to text and ask them for advice, I'm sure they'd be happy to help.
All right.
Okay. So visits. Let's move on to, let's see. I have one for Ari. Ari, so you're a current first year at St. Thomas. Like, what is preseason like? Sum it up quick. And then I want you to give advice, well, to Liv, who's going to one next year, or to anybody who's a senior right now. Like, what's it like, and how do you best prepare for it if there's any way to actually do that?
Okay, so this year obviously was different with COVID. We actually didn't have a season this fall, so it was like much different than it normally would be. But normally from what I heard, like preseason, like you got to come in fit. It's a lot the first few weeks, but you get used to it, I guess. But some advice that I would give is like obviously come in fit, but also like be open to everything. Like don't think like you're going to get playing time, or like you may not even be in the position that you were recruited for. Just like be open to everything that the coach may like want you to do, I guess.
Okay. That's good advice. You may, so, okay. Come in fit and definitely be open-minded, because you never know like what role you'll be asked to play. Just kind of be all in.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you. And I have, okay, so to the group, if you have questions, type them in the chat and I can make sure to ask them for you. Joe, if I missed something, let me know. The last one that I have for you. So Liv, I want to hear, what advice do you have for somebody who's just starting their process? One quick piece of advice. And then Hadley, I hear you've had to be pretty creative with COVID to kind of make yourself stand out. So I want to know, like, what is one way that tell us about one of those creative ways, and then how did it work out? If that makes sense. I'm alluding to, I know Joe talked to me about a special project he had you do, which I want to hear about. So Liv, piece of advice for somebody just getting started.
I'd say just be open to anything. You'll find the right school. Don't rush it, because if you rush it, you might not end up finding that great school that you want at the end. And just be positive about it. It's a really long process. It's a hard thing to do. It's hard to stick with it. But it's worth it. Like, if it's what you want to do, like, stick with it and you'll find the right school.
Awesome. I see Ari nodding her head as well. It's good advice. All right. And then Hadley, talk to us about how creative you've had to be and how that worked out.
Yeah, so going into COVID, I had like a list of probably like 5 or 7 like really strong relationships that I had, and just as time went on, that deadline kept getting pushed back. I just wanted to like expand on that a little bit, but like it was just really hard to get like responses. So Joe had me write like this, like an email that was kind of like more risky, I guess, because like he had nothing to lose at that point really, because I already had like enough relationships. So like if it didn't work out or they didn't like it, like no harm was really done.
Right.
I kind of like, it was kind of just a lot more personal, and it kind of was a little bit further away from like soccer and more about like me as a person kind of, and like my interests. It was just kind of something different that like got attention from people, I guess.
And did you got more replies from that one?
Yeah, and so I did, and it wasn't like a super high response rate, probably like 2 out of every 5 schools I emailed, but like it like developed some really good relationships that I have now. So like it was definitely worth the work I had to put into it. So
okay, awesome. Those are good ones. They stand out. I've gotten a few the last couple of weeks, and some of them are like 2024, 25. You're like, oh my gosh, you guys are so young. Like, I'll put you on the list, but again, it's such a nice detailed email where you just tell like, okay, this person really sat down and gave this a lot of thought. I need to respond to them. So if you're not getting replies, get into maybe more detail, like really dive into, talk more about, yourself as a player or your aspirations for your college career. Like, trust me, the more we feel like you're really invested in that process, the more as a college coach, you feel like, you know what, I owe it to this player. I need to give them a reply. Let's help them out. So yeah, it can be a long process, and you got to be creative, and you just got to find ways, like get yourself looked at, get your list kind of narrowed down, figure out what's the right fit for you. And then like Liv said is, don't rush it either. Right. It's a lot of work. You'll find the right place. So if anyone has questions, let me know. Joe, if you have anything, let me know. Otherwise, that is all I've got, you guys. Thank you so much, the 3 of you. I feel like your insight can be so much more impactful to our players. You're in it, in the process. One of you has finished it. You're already in college, and Liv, you're just kind of anxiously waiting to get there next year. So you guys definitely represent where a lot of our players like want to be. So I appreciate your time. I honestly do. And that's all I got, you guys. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everybody.
all right, thanks, Jesse.
You're welcome. Bye, Hadley. Liv,
Bye.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.